All right, let's jump back into enterprise blockchains. When we're looking at utility tokens,
Yeah.
we have our list. Use case, market function, tokenomics, team, tech, security, ecosystem development, community, liquidity, regulatory stuff.
Right. It's like our toolkit.
Yeah.
Helps us see which tokens are ready for the big leagues, enterprise adoption.
I like that. So today we're looking at 3 tokens that are all calling themselves enterprise grade.
Right.
Onyx, Quant, and Hedera. But, and this is what's interesting, they're all doing things pretty differently.
Yeah, it's not one size fits all. Each one is on a different path, and we're going to see which one leads to that, widespread enterprise use.
Okay, let's start with Onyx, or XCN. What's the idea there?
So with Onyx, they're all about building the infrastructure so enterprises can launch their own financial products.
Okay.
Their platform's called Chain Core, and it helps companies build and scale these products using blockchain.
So it's like giving financial institutions a special toolkit to build their own blockchain ecosystems.
Exactly. It's about helping businesses use blockchain without starting from scratch.
Smart. And what about the XCN token? Is it just for raising money, or is there something more to it?
It's meant to be the fuel, the power behind the whole chain ecosystem.
Okay.
You can use it for payments, within their system. You can vote on stuff. You can even get discounts on fees.
Sounds great in theory, but is it actually happening in the real world? I mean, we know adoption is a big challenge for a lot of these projects.
You got it. That's where things get a little fuzzy with Onyx.
Okay.
They've had some partnerships in the past with some big names like NASDAQ and Visa, but it's hard to find evidence of large-scale, real-world use of XCN.
So it's classic potential versus reality.
Yeah.
I've got the tools, but is anyone actually using them? What about their tokenomics? Any red flags there?
Yeah, that's another area where Onyx gets some criticism.
Okay.
The total supply of XCN is huge, and a good amount of it went to founders and the team, and that makes some people worry about dilution for holders in the future.
So not only is adoption unclear, but the tokenomics might be a problem for investors. It's like buying a ticket to a show that might not even happen.
Right.
And even if it does, there might not be enough seats. Okay, let's bring in another contender, Quant, with its QNT token. How does that compare to Onyx?
Quant is doing something totally different. They're tackling interoperability.
Okay.
Their system, Overledger, is trying to connect all these different blockchains, which is a big problem for enterprises, who are dealing with a fragmented blockchain world.
So they're not building another blockchain, they're building the bridges between the ones that already exist.
Exactly. They see that the future is going to be multi-chain, and they want to be the connectors in this whole system.
And are they actually getting traction? Are they putting their money where their mouth is?
They are. Unlike Onyx, Quant has partnered with some big names like Oracle. And SIA. And these aren't just little pilot projects.
Right.
These are serious commitments.
Okay, so they've got the partnerships, which hopefully means actual use. How about their tokenomics? Are they as iffy as XCNs?
Thankfully, no.
Okay, good.
Quant has a fixed supply of QNT tokens, so there's only going to ever be so many. And they've been open about how they're distributed. That makes QNT much more attractive for an investor.
Okay, so Quant seems to have a better path to adoption, and their tokenomics are better. But we can't forget about our third contender, Hedera, or HBAR. What's their deal?
Hedera is an interesting one. They're not going after a specific area like Onyx or Quant.
Okay.
They want to be the base for all kinds of enterprise applications. Their network, it's called Hedera Hashgraph. It's built for speed, security, and you guessed it, enterprise use.
So they're going for a broad approach, trying to be the one-stop shop for enterprise blockchain. Big promises, but what sets them apart?
Here's where it gets really interesting. Hedera's governing council.
Okay.
It's like a who's who of giants, Google, IBM, Boeing, and more. It's not just a group of startups.
Right.
These are established institutions putting their weight behind Hedera.
That's a big vote of confidence. But are they just lending their names? Are there any real-world applications on Hedera?
That's the best part. Hedera's already being used for all kinds of stuff.
Okay.
We're seeing it in micropayments, digital identity, supply chain management.
Wow.
They're not just talking, they're delivering.
Okay, so they've got the backing, the tech, and the real-world use. It's looking pretty good. But how do all 3 of these stack up against each other, looking at our 10 categories?
That's where we get to the real analysis.
Why?
But remember, this is just our take based on what's out there publicly. And things change fast in crypto.
Always good to remember.
Yeah.
So what's the verdict?
Based on what we see, Hedera comes out on top with a score of 84 out of 100.
Okay.
Quant's close behind at 75, and Onyx lags behind with 48.
Wow, that's a big difference. What put Hedera at the top, and where did Onyx and Quant fall short?
So Hedera scored really well in tech, security, governance, and ecosystem development. Their hashgraph technology is really innovative. Their governing council brings stability, and they have a ton of real-world applications popping up. They're checking a lot of boxes.
It sounds like they found the sweet spot.
Yep.
Innovation, credibility, and real-world impact. What about Quant? They seemed promising with that interoperability focus.
Yeah, Quant's great at interoperability, and they have those big partnerships. But they lost some points on tokenomics because their distribution model isn't as transparent as Hedera's.
So even with a solid use case, their tokenomics hold them back.
Exactly. It's not just about a good idea. It's about doing it in a way that builds trust and attracts both users and investors.
Makes sense. And Onyx, what happened there?
Onyx struggled in a few areas. They're not very clear about their real-world usage. There are those tokenomics concerns, and their ecosystem isn't as developed.
So it's a few things: lack of clarity, potential tokenomics issues, and a weaker ecosystem. They have potential, but haven't quite figured out how to use it.
That's a good way to put it. They've got some work to do if they want to catch up to Hedera and Quant.
Okay, so we've got a clear leader in Hedera,
Right.
a strong contender in Quant, and a potential underdog in Onyx. Now, before we move on, you mentioned ISO 2022 compliance earlier. What does that even mean, and why does it matter here?
ISO 2022 compliance is like the secret handshake of the financial world.
Okay.
It's all about having the same standards for how financial messages get sent back and forth. If a blockchain wants to work with the big players in traditional finance, it needs to be ISO 2022 compliant.
So it's about speaking the same language as banks and institutions. Why is that so important?
It's about interoperability on a bigger scale. It's not just about connecting different blockchains. It's about connecting blockchain to the entire existing financial system.
So it's like building a bridge between the old and the new. How do our three tokens stack up when it comes to ISO 2022 compliance?
Hedera is the one that gets mentioned the most when you talk about ISO 2022.
Oh.
Probably because they're so focused on enterprise adoption, and a lot of those companies on their governing council are already using this standard.
So they're already fluent in the language of traditional finance, while the others are still learning the basics. Does that give them a big advantage?
It definitely puts them in a good position for integration down the road. They have the tech, the governance, and now the compatibility to bridge that gap between blockchain and traditional finance. That's powerful.
It sounds like they've got all the right cards. But before we get carried away, let's do a quick price check. How are these tokens doing in the market as of today, January 8th, 2025?
Today, XCN is trading at 0.00254. Quant is way up at $106.14.
Okay.
Which shows its stronger adoption and that fixed supply. And Hedera, our current frontrunner, is at 0.28567 cents.
Quite a range.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see how the market's already valuing these different approaches.
Yeah.
But folks, remember, prices change all the time. What matters is the long-term vision and how these projects execute.
Absolutely. Don't get caught up in the short-term hype. Focus on the fundamentals, the team, the tech, and the real-world impact. That's what determines the winners.
Good advice. We've covered a lot, but there's still more to explore. We'll be back with part 2 of this deep dive, where we'll really dig into the specific use cases for each token and talk about their potential impact on the future of finance.
Pump it up, like it's